So in most videos, we tend to focus on the tools, the methodologies to improve your business. And in this video, we want to do something a little bit different. We want to focus on tools and methodologies to improve the most important tool of them all, your brain. How to improve the brain, how to stay focused, how to focus longer, how to dive into deep work. We're going to take a short, straight to the point dive into Breathworks for neuroplasticity to increase your human potential, precision nutrition to enhance the body, Nootropics to enhance your brain, Stoicism to calm your nerves, meditation to be more creative, and a bunch of other tips. Time is your scarcest resource. It's been estimated that you have approximately 80,000 hours in a career, and you want to use that time wisely. Most other videos you'll find on YouTube will give you some more conventional tips, and you should probably follow these. So for example, focusing on one task at a time, or time restricting your tasks with the Pomodoro technique, doing the most difficult things first, do the hard stuff at the beginning of the day, taking breaks, going for walks, setting up your day the night before, or for example, eliminating distractions and time wasters. This is all great advice and you should follow it, but this video will be about optimizing the foundation, your brain and your body, to reach this beautiful, constant state of flow, as documented by Mihai Csikszentmihalyi in his book of the same name. And if you want to research this state of flow even more, you can also see this talk or this book by Kotler. And as anything, see these as experiments. You can try them out, see what works for you, and see what doesn't. So first, let's talk about Breathworks, also called holotropic breathing. Neuroplasticity is the ability of the brain to partially rewire itself, especially in reaction to learning or experience. There's strong literature to show that as we get older, our personality traits, our way of thinking tend to stabilize. They don't change so much anymore. Now, neuroplasticity, creating new synaptic connections, is a powerful way of building creativity. One proven way to achieve this is through long periods of meditation. But meditation can be very challenging. I see it sort of like a marathon. Breathworks is more like a 100-meter sprint. It's like meditation on steroids. You get the benefits in 1/100th of the time, maybe even 1/1000th of the time. Coined and created by Stanislas Grof, holotropic breathing was recently popularized by people like Wim Hof, and we see a whole movement towards it. This form of breathing allows you to attain intellectual insights, even emotional breakthroughs, and it's helped us to induce a state of flow. Not only will it induce more focus, it can actually also give you more insights into art, politics, and science. As Peter demonstrated to us, this type of intense breathing changes some structures of the brain. And since these connections are changed, you actually address problems with a different angle and with calmer concentration. So what is this form of breathing? Well, it's basically intense breathing techniques that create hypoxia, changes in oxygen levels in the blood. And by the way, we tend to be skeptical of these things, and this is not spiritual hocus pocus. You'll see that the recent Nobel Prize winners in physiology were all about this state of hypoxia. So here are some tips on how to experiment with this, how to get started. First, we'd recommend checking out this video, which will allow you to do a small session of your own. And remember, be gentle with yourself. If you want to take things further, we'd also recommend reading this book. And it's a fantastic journey into more understanding of the subconscious and the deep subconscious. And if you're really serious, I'd invite you to look for and join a local holotropic breathwork session near you. For example, with Growth Tribe, we organized a session internally with Peter from Breath of Freedom. Give this one a shot and let us know in the comments if this did anything for you. I've personally had some really strong breakthroughs with these breathing sessions, from a creative point of view, from a focus point of view, but even from an emotional point of view. You'd be surprised at what we're suppressing from within and how getting rid of those tensions actually helps with work, focus, life, etc. So of course, in the same vein, you have meditation. A recent study by Italian neuroscientist Giuseppe Pannoni found that meditation changes brain patterns, improves mental and cognitive performance. If you haven't done so yet, give it a try. It's a powerful way to calm nerves, find more focus, and reduce task anxiety. Another recent MRI-based study by Sarah W. Lazara and her team found that 40 to 50-year-old meditators had the same amount of gray matter in their cortex as the 20 to 30-year-old ones. Now, if you want to get started, it's actually quite easy and you don't need to do this every day. Here are some tips. I'd first give it a try with this beautiful meditation from Alan Watts. Of course, there's also a ton of free to try apps to choose from. Calm, which has some nice background music. Headspace, which has really good methodology and voices. And Waking Up by Sam Harris. And small tip, if you're meditating for the first time, I would actually suggest to do it on an empty stomach in the morning if that's possible. Speaking of an empty stomach, let's dive into fasting a little bit. Fasting has completely improved our focus, our productivity, and our overall health. And although it might sound difficult, it's actually not that difficult to get started. And even if you're not looking into fasting to actually lose weight, its benefits really deserve your attention. So fasting is basically not eating for an extended period of time. Intermittent fasting is alternating periods of eating and periods of not eating. In a nutshell, the longer you fast, the greater the benefits, with limits of course. So what happens when you fast? Well, fasting stimulates the production of a protein that's found in nerve cells, and this protein is called the brain-derived neurotrophic factor. BDNF plays a very important role in learning, in memory, and in generating new nerve cells in the hippocampus. That's the part of your brain responsible for things like memory. BDNF also makes your neurons more resistant to stress. Now, fasting also kicks off a process called autophagy. That's when cells clean themselves by removing damaged molecules and dysfunctional mitochondria. Autophagy also turns off cell growth. So during fasting, neurons go into a sort of resource conservation and stress resistance mode. Now what happens is when you start eating again, the neurons, they go back into growth mode. They start making a lot of proteins, they grow, and they form new synapses. And what's beautiful is these on and off sequences, these cycles, they may optimize neuroplasticity, learning, memory, and the resistance of the brain to stress. Now, if you're interested, it's actually not that difficult to get started. And by the way, don't worry, this doesn't mean you're going to eat less. You're going to get the same calorie intake you were getting before, just during a shorter period of time. Also, it's totally fine to drink water, tea, or coffee, anything that doesn't have calories, so no adding sugar to your tea or to your coffee. It actually makes it a lot easier. There's basically 4 or 5 different types of fasting plans that you can do, and we've ranked them from easy to hard. So basically, you've got the 16-8, which means that for 16 hours you don't eat, and you eat during an 8-hour period. This basically means that you just need to skip breakfast, and we've put this one as being easy. If you start to feel the benefits from this, you can try the 18-6. 18-6 is basically eating for 6 hours and fasting for 18 hours, and we've put the difficulty at medium because it means that you either need to have an earlier dinner the night before or push your lunch to a later hour. Then there's the 24. This is the one I'm currently on, after doing about 2 months on the 16-8 and another 3 months on the 18-6. The 24 is a little bit challenging, but I'm really feeling the benefits, and that's where you eat between, for example, 4 to 8 p.m. So you fast for 20 hours and you eat for 4 hours. We've put this one as hard. It's not just hard on the body, it's also hard from a social point of view. For example, I don't have lunch with colleagues anymore, and sometimes I take a cheat day to be able to eat with the family. Then you've got the next one, which is also really hard. It's called the OMAD, which stands for 1 meal a day. That's basically where you're cramming all of your calories into one single meal during the day. And finally, one that's really been growing in popularity, it's called the 5-2. It means you do 5 days normal, and then 2 days during the week, you're going to eat less than 500 calories. Typically, it's suggested to do this on a Tuesday and a Thursday because Monday you're kicking the week off, and because Friday maybe you want to party or go out with friends. So 2 days during the week, you eat less than 500 calories. Now, if you want to dive into a little bit more about the why and the what of fasting, I would recommend this small compilation from people who came onto the Joe Rogan podcast. It's a mix of MMA fighters and doctors, and it'll really highlight some of the beautiful experiences they've had. I'd also recommend watching this small lecture by Dr. Longo. And then as a last tip, I'd like you to try this small experiment. I'd like you to try fasting for 1 week just by skipping breakfast. So all you got to do is for 1 week, you skip breakfast every single day. It's probably going to be a little bit hard the first day. It gets a lot easier the second day, and then day 3, 4, 5, I think you're going to start to feel the benefits. You'll get into this sort of zone. You'll feel a lot lighter and a lot more focused. And then, as I mentioned before, your body's used to getting food in the morning, so you want to drink a lot of water or maybe some tea or maybe some coffee to fill it and make it think that you're giving it food. But don't forget, 0 calories, so no sugar or cream or milk. I hope this was helpful, and let us know what type of fasting regimen you follow in the comments. Now, apart from fasting, are there other ways of improving your focus and your brain? Yes, nootropics. Now, nootropics are a wide range of natural and synthetic compounds that are thought to improve cognitive function. From very common products like caffeine or fish oil to more risky products such as modafinil or psychedelics, nootropics are here to enhance your cognitive abilities. Now, although meta-analyses on these nootropics are sometimes inconsistent, it's sometimes hard to find the literature that will back up with findings the effect of these nootropics. Personal experience of myself and people around us have shown us that these do actually work. So for this video, we're going to stick to some safe, natural compounds as examples. First example is DHA-CAP that's found, for example, in fish oil and that has been proven to lubrify the synapses and increase memory retention. There's also lion's mane, which is an incredible, beautiful mushroom that's proven to clean amyloid beta plaques that affect brain function, and it helps with overall cognitive function. Then there's L-theanine that's been shown to reduce anxiety. It's a really nice combination when you're taking coffee, tea, or caffeine pills. If you're ever like me, get a little bit of jitters from coffee, try a pill of L-theanine to reduce the jitters. By the way, L-theanine and caffeine are naturally found together in matcha tea. Yeah, because caffeine is also a nootropic. 3 years ago, I switched from coffee to green tea. They both contain the same thing, caffeine, except the caffeine release of tea is a little bit slower and a bit more stable. So I've found it helpful to make a big jug of it and just drink this steadily throughout the day, and it gives me this smooth, steady flow and energy from the beginning to the end of the day. Then there's a last random one we'd like to recommend, which is ashwagandha. It's sort of a miracle plant that helps calm the nerves and helps you focus. And it's really helped me to dive more into deep work. Now, these are just a few examples. You need to find what works for you and you need to experiment with these. And if possible, experiment with the safer ones. Now, for a full list of effects of nootropics, you can see the results from this small, predominantly male, yes, but still interesting survey on Reddit. It's interesting to see some of the products where there's strong consensus. And if you really want to dive deeper and you're interested in this, I'd recommend following this full guide on nootropics, which is also found on Reddit. It's great for beginners, it tells you the what, the how, and it outlines some of the most popular supplements. Now, speaking of things you put into your body, let's talk about precision nutrition. We ran a little survey to find out what percentage of people feel energy dips during the day. We found that 73% of our respondents felt dips 4 or 5 times a week in the afternoon. That's a huge number. Why are we getting these dips in the afternoon? Some of these dips are caused by blood sugar spikes. Spikes of sugar in your blood and insulin levels, which lead to a sharp rise in energy, boom, followed by a steep crash. We often call these afternoon dips. It turns out studies at the Weizmann Institute in Israel have demonstrated that humans have personalized reactions to food intake. Now, what does that mean? You know all of those tips to eat less fat, don't eat dairy, don't eat red meat, don't eat wheat, eat fewer carbs, limit your alcohol, limit your caffeine? They actually don't hold true for everyone because we all individually react differently to different foods. Because of 3 things. Because of differences in our DNA, because of differences in our gut microbiome, and because of differences in our lifestyle, we react differently to different foods. Some people will get a spike in blood sugar levels from ice cream, and others won't. Some will spike from white wines, and others not at all. Now, the best way to actually know what works well for you is actually to monitor your blood sugar levels. Using a sensor such as this one, which you can wear for 2 weeks, you can actually start correlating certain foods with spikes in blood sugar and insulin. And then you can start selecting or removing certain foods at certain times from your diet. And for me, it's helped me become more healthy and remove almost all spikes and dips in the afternoon. And it was interesting for me to see that I should avoid this, or this, or this, and that things like wine, although still bad for my liver, weren't causing sugar spikes. Now, if you're interested in learning more about this, I'd suggest you check out this beautiful TED Talk, which explains why we have different reactions to different foods. I'd also suggest you check out this video about the microbiome, about your gut. And then a last tip is that you can also look into whether there's a precision nutrition program around you. We took part in the Clear Health program here in Amsterdam, and now we're working on offering this to the rest of the organization. Now, this one's a bit more personal and it's also a bit more vague, but it still yields some powerful results. We're going to dive a little bit into Stoicism. To describe it harshly, for me, Stoicism is a little bit like Zen Buddhism, but perfectly adapted to people from the Western world with really analytical minds like mine. The basic idea is the same. We spend too much time trying to optimize external sources of happiness. What we buy, who we hang out with, where we go on holiday, what we own. And we spend way too little time optimizing internal sources, internal variables of happiness. If you optimize internally, the same situation, the same outside world will actually look more beautiful. You'll feel less dissatisfied, and then you'll have more headspace for deep work and focus. Some basic concepts of Stoicism are to, for example, focus only on what you can control control and accept what you can't control. There's also the idea to take action. The true philosopher is a sort of a warrior of the mind who actually takes action. Another one which I really like is to practice misfortune. Ask yourself what could go wrong. And then a fourth nice concept is to turn obstacles into opportunities. Some people call this resilience. Perception is actually key. And if this sounds like a little bit of life coaching, okay, sure, it is a little bit of life coaching, but it's just a tip, an experiment that you can try. Now, here are some practical mind exercises that I'd love for you to try for the next week. Now, you know how you're sometimes dissatisfied with what you currently have and you're always wanting more? Some people call this hedonic adaptation. Well, for once, try to wish for something you already have. You're trying to create a desire for something you already possess. It could be family, friends, a phone, a warm place to sit. So right now, I'm gonna wish that I had a nice video studio in a great city with an amazing video producer to produce some nice insights. Hey, we're doing it right now. This actually feels great. Another tip I sometimes do is to try to imagine the beauty and the taste of a glass of water after a long trek in the sun. Try this one out, it's kind of fun. The second tip is to try something called negative visualization. Try to imagine that you lost what you currently had. Loss of possession or loss of loved ones, for example. And rather than making your outlook gloomy, this will actually make your current situation more satisfying. You'll appreciate it more. There's this notion that most of us are already living the dream. We just don't realize it yet, and it has to do with perception. And here's a third tip, this one's kind of nice. At some point during the week, I'd like you to increase your comfort zone. How do you increase your comfort zone? It's by putting yourself in an uncomfortable situation. For example, maybe try walking shoeless for a while, or maybe wear a t-shirt in really cold weather. Wearing t-shirts in cold weather or opening your coat a little bit will not just make you stronger, but it's also gonna make you appreciate the comfort of warmth even more. So if you want to take this further than these 3 tips, I'd recommend reading Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, which is basically the day in the life of one of the most powerful people in the world who also happens to be a Stoic. Next, we're going to talk about timing, not so much focusing on what to focus on, but when to focus on it. Daniel H. Pink has studied the fact that our cognitive abilities sort of fluctuate during the day. These daily fluctuations are more extreme than we realize. How we do during the day actually depends on what we're doing and when we're doing it. Now, when these moods and performance oscillate during the day, it turns out that for most of us, mood follows a common pattern: a peak, a dip, and a rebound. Now, in the mornings during this peak, most of us tend to excel at analytical work that requires sharpness, vigilance, focus, this deep, analytical, hard work. Later in the day, during the recovery phase after the dip, most of us do better on insight work that requires less inhibition, things that are a bit easier, a bit more repetitive, maybe things like admin work. And then a bit later in the day, when the cognitive abilities start to go up again, that's where you can get more creative, more social, with meetings, for example, or applying your creativity. A lot of us at Growth Tribe have been applying this for the past 2-3 years, and it's really shown its effect. People like Job or Stefan have actually blocked whole chunks of their calendars so that they don't get meetings in the morning and can focus on the deep work. If you want to go further with this, you can watch this beautiful RSA video by Daniel Pink, or just read his book in detail. Now we're going to go a little bit faster into some small basic tips that can also help you with focus. So we know that a great way to help focus is by removing audio distractions, like by having sound cancelling headphones, for example. What we tend to forget is also visual distractions, visual cues. Our brains were hardwired a long time ago to react to things moving, in case it was a dangerous tiger trying to eat us, for example. So when you're working and when you're trying to focus, you also want to remove as many visual cues as possible. We do this by being in areas where there's not continuously things moving in our plane of sight. Try to remove any and all visual notifications from your life. Imagine that you're trying to get deep sleep and someone keeps tapping you every 5 minutes. You're never going to get deep sleep. It's the same thing with these visual notifications or these visual cues. One you might not have thought of is all those extra tabs in your browser. They're also visual cues. So try to remove as many tabs or applications as possible because they're constantly reminding you that there's something else going on that you can be working on. So kill those tabs. Another small tip is to have accountability partners, people or things who hold you accountable for what you said you would do. This can be a boss, of course, but it can also be a virtual deadline you create for yourself. It can be a friend. As Ansi has pointed to me in the past, having an accountability partner really helps. We are very social creatures. So having someone who holds you accountable for whether or not you've achieved something is very helpful. So this one's a bit more vague, but it's the idea of developing self-reliance. The less you rely on other people to get things done, the less you'll actually need to communicate and get distracted. Self-reliance means continuously building on your skills, your analytical skills, your design skills, your copywriting copywriting skills, your data skills, your interpersonal skills. Try to have as many skills as possible so you don't have to ask other people or hand over projects to other people. Then you can stay in the zone and keep focused. Here's another small one. It's to postpone communication. As soon as you get the urge to communicate to somebody, to ask them a question on a project you're working on, don't do it now. Just write down that question and do it a little bit later. Because if you start communicating now, you're going to get out of the zone, out of the focus zone. You can always write it down and do it a little bit later. And then of course the last 2 tips is to exercise, but you've heard this one before. One small tip is try to do exercise that you really enjoy. Don't just do it to hit numbers for your tracker. Actually do an exercise you're passionate about or that you enjoy doing. And then the last tip is to get some really good sleep. Read this book by Matthew Walker or watch this lecture by Matthew Walker, and you'll see the importance of sleep for your brain, for your cognitive function. Having said that, this is probably the tip that I haven't been able to follow yet, so I'm going to practice this week. If you think this was helpful, support us by sharing some of your tips in the comments. This, of course, wasn't a deep dive. We skimmed the surface on these subjects. If you want us to go deeper into the methodology and the why and the how, let us know in the comments. And of course, happy focusing.